Hello, welcome to this video on the treasure of the mind. The mind through multiple different faiths, through my own faith of Jainism, but through several others, including Christianity, Buddhism, through Islam, through astrology, a modern concept of Western astrology and Eastern astrology, looking at the moon as an influencer of the mind, of benefic and malefic planets, looking at science and medicine and psychiatry and the concept of the mind and cognitive behavioural therapy. Is it a science or is it an art, or is it a combination of the two? We can explore 5 metaphors on the mind. As the title suggests, the first is the treasure of the mind. The second, the mind as food for thought. The third, the 5 senses and the mind, the controller. The fourth, the fire and the digging well of the mind. All of these drawn from my own philosophy of Jainism and an ancient book written by a saint, but applicable to concepts through each and every philosophy and system you can find will have similar stories and tales. Sow a thought and you reap an action. Sow an action and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character. Sow a character and you reap a destiny. 5 wise men gathered to discuss which of the 5 senses is the most difficult to control. The first said, is it not the tongue? 1 tongue, 2 functions. Taking the first, is the tongue, function of speech, not the cause for most arguments, battles, divorces, world wars in this world today? Surely that is really difficult and most important to control. And gluttony, one of the 7 deadly sins, is that not from the tongue? Out of the 4 enemies of anger, deceit, pride and greed, the greed is the most destructive, and a big part of that, or one function of that, is from the tongue itself. And food, the second said no. What about sight? Is the moth not lured to its own death by the light of a flame or a bulb? It's not controlled its sight and it invites it to its own death. The third said no. Is it not hearing? The most advanced sense of all. And you say about the moth, what about the deer? The music of the hunter attracting the deer because it has not gained control over its ears. It's oblivious to the danger. Hence hearing is the most important to control. The fourth said no. The most basic of all the senses is touch. Touch, the only sense that the one-sensed beings like plants, earth, water, wind and fire have. Surely if we can control touch, the rest will follow in time. And the fifth said, does not the insect get attracted by smell into the very jaws of death of the Venus fly trap? Surely smell, which I have controlled, is the most difficult. They argued, and finally they decided to seek an answer from an enlightened master, a saint. They went to this saint, and the saint said, let me answer your question in the form of a metaphor. He said, imagine a palace. This palace has 5 gates, and thieves want to get in. If even one of the gates is open, the thieves will manage to get in even if the other 4 are shut. And the treasure, or the person within that palace who needs to be kept safe, is called the mind. The mind is the commander of the army, and the 5 senses are only soldiers. If the commander is gained a victory over, the soldiers will soon follow, become the master of the mind itself. Life is a battle, and as the ancient proverb, the most difficult battles in life are those within. The soul is a warrior, and the uncontrolled mind is an enemy, with the 5 senses being its army. Some weapons of the uncontrolled mind include anger, greed, desire, infatuation, malice, attraction. And the soul fights with the weapon of restraint, the shield of restraint. Hence, the answer to your question is none of the 5 senses, but the mind itself that is the most difficult to control. And once the mind is controlled, everything is controlled. The one who has controlled his mind has conquered the world. Or as the great poet Saint Anand Ganji said, Man sadhu dene sadhu sadhu. In the absence of healthy food, one would eat junk rather than starve. Similarly, in the absence of upward momentum, water always flows downwards, just like the waterfalls you see in this picture. Similarly, in the absence of good thoughts, the untrained mind will divert to negative thoughts rather than starve. Hence, the moral of this metaphor is to feed the untrained mind good thoughts so that the water does not flow down in the absence of upward momentum and negative thoughts do not enter. In previous ancient times, there was a saying, dig a well deep near your home before the fire starts. Similarly, one should train one's mind to be calm in any situation before that situation or negative stimulus arises. If fire is put out early while it's just a spark, a whole forest fire can be prevented. But if there is no water early on, how would you hope to put out that fire? Just as with any training to calm the mind and be mindful in advance of the situation where it is required can help one immensely in training the seemingly untrainable mind. The mind is the center of man. It is the potential source of all of our energies, and the mind is our dearly loved child. We ought to keep the child neat and clean, ever vigilant about security. But after all, a child is only a child, sure to be in danger if we do not take care, and the child of the developing mind is at risk from the kidnapper of lack of restraint. And even if this kidnapper offers sweets to the child, we would warn our child to stay away. The only difficulty? The outer appearance would be disguised within rather than as above. Taking the sweets of the kidnapper is like taking various shortcuts, giving in to anger, greed, ego, deceit, temptations, doing what is best for the short term and becoming a slave to the uncontrolled mind rather than its master. These sweets can taste good for a short time, maybe for the whole lifetime, but in the eternity of time and space, the lack of control and the kidnapper will be an enemy in the disguise of a friend. As the poem goes, you may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass, if you've given your child of the developing mind to the kidnapper offering sweets in the form of temptations. The treasure of the mind. Heaps of hidden treasures lie stored up in our minds. These priceless treasures of our spiritual wealth cannot be stolen by a thief if kept under careful control. How much care should we take and have we taken of our mind? What guards have we appointed to secure its impregnability? We are lost in the labyrinth of false visions. We are more careful for our physical well-being than for our mental and spiritual welfare. Even though the body, dust to dust, ashes to ashes, doth return, it cannot endow us with real happiness or peace. Hence, we must set up scouts to make certain of the security of the stronghold of our mind with only positive, peaceful thoughts. We must keep watch over the riches of our mind, so that they may not be stolen in the wrong hands. Our guard against bad thoughts, letting good thoughts enter freely. Sacred books or various scriptures inspire virtuous thoughts, fixing the inner eye of God, the ocean of kindness, are real knights for guarding us. At the entrance of the threshold of the mind, so this invaluable wealth will be adequately preserved, and this wealth alone will lead us to imperishable and eternal bliss.